essence, using this new dating method, this newer technology, you're not dating the pigment of the cave art itself. You're taking samples of the geology that's sort of formed layer by layer on top of the actual
Yeah.
art. It's more sophisticated, it's more sensitive, so you can date things with more precision. You can go back further in time. And you mentioned Sulawesi, this site where you guys were excavating. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? So let's just start. Where is this, and how did you actually start looking there? Why did you look in this place and not some other place?
Yeah, well, we didn't excavate the sites where we dated rock art. Like my colleague Adam Brom is excavating some sites there, but there is rock art there, but we don't have dates on the oldest paintings. But yeah, it started there. I started to work there because so I don't know how much of the story you want, but at the time I was in Australia. I was in the Australian National University, and then I finished my PhD. They offered me a postdoc, and then I applied for in Australia. You can apply for funding to the it's called the Australian Research Council. And I applied for a fellowship, which I got, and it was for 3 years. And I decided to move it to a different university. It was University of Wollongong. And then when I got there, then I was sharing an office with Adam Brom, who was working in Sulawesi doing digs there, like uh, excavations. And in the excavations that he was doing there, he was finding a lot of ochre, like in really old layers, but he didn't know if it related to the rock art. But there's a lot of rock art there, and it's been known for a long time.
Mhm.
But most of the people thought that the rock art was relatively recent. They thought that it was dated to the Austronesian period. So Austronesian is the first farmers that arrived there. We think they arrived from probably Taiwan, maybe 4,000 years ago, and they like introduced rice and farming and etc. So people in general thought that the paintings there dated to that time. And then one time Adam went to a rock art site on a Sunday or something, and then he was looking up, and then there's lots of handstand sills, and then he saw those small nodules on top of it. And then when he came back to the office, he showed it to me, and I said, "Yeah, they're like cave popcorn. I'm pretty sure we can date those." And then it's a long story. We asked for funding from the university. They didn't want to help us. So I said we were broke, so we just paid. I paid myself tickets. Went there. I went at the back of at the back of a motorbike, going around and looking at caves, and then and took some samples, and then brought them back to the lab. And then I was like, what? Like it was like 40,000 years old. So yeah, so that was a big shock and a big discovery at the time.
Hmm. So you didn't
Um,
necessarily expect this ahead of time. You didn't have
no,
reason to
no,
think it
not
would
at
be this
all.
old. It just happened that way.
Yeah, it just happened that way, and then we dated bit more. One like we had like at the time we didn't have any sample over like animal. There was only hand stencil, and we dated. I think it was 3 or 4 hand stencil, and we had multiple dates, per because we're doing all those sub layers. And then something very frustrating happened is that we wrote a paper, we sent it to the most prestigious scientific journal in the world. We said surely that's going to get in. And then it was rejected. And then the reason why it was rejected was even more frustrating. It was because the reviewers, because when you write a scientific papers, it goes for peer review and stuff. So the peer review got back and they said they didn't have any issues with the dating, but essentially it was too controversial, the result, because it essentially unseated Europe as the bird of art,
Oh
that they
wow.
said that they wanted more. But I've seen a lot of papers in those journal with less evidence than that. So then, and remember, we were broke. So then people were said, "Oh, what do we do? So do we just submit it to like a different journal, which is less impact factor and etc." But at the time, we were really young in our career, so a paper in the top scientific journal in the world will help your career a lot. So we said, okay, we'll just bite and then we went back the next year. We got more samples. We got like an animal as well. So essentially figurative art. We got more and stencil, and then we changed the paper. We sent it again. We did because when you submit a paper, you need to write a letter to the editor. We did a better letter explaining why this is important, and then it got accepted, and then it got published, and it was put on the front cover of Nature. And then that it was in 2014, so 10 years ago. And also, so there's Nature and there's Science. That's the two biggest multidisciplinary journals in the world. And Science, every year they have a top 10 scientific breakthrough of the year. So they picked that up in the top 10 scientific breakthrough of the year.
Hmm.
So then we went on from there, and then we made that list another time also a
And
couple of
and
years
and
later.
so these cave paintings that you're talking about, how old are the older ones, and what are they actually painting? What were the humans interested in depicting?
Yes, so the oldest one we've got so far, so that's the one we published a few weeks ago. It's so the minimum age, because we're dating the calcite on top of it, is 51,200. So it's a site called Yang Karampuang. So it's in southwest Sulawesi. So Sulawesi, it's an island in the Indonesia. So it's immediately yeah. So okay, you're sharing it on the screen. So yes, so that's that one there. So essentially a depiction of a pig, and there's at least three human figures next to it.
I see.
We think
So
the
so the pig is this structure here,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
these
If you
smaller figures next to it are supposed to be human depictions.
yeah, there's three human figures. So this is a drawing of it because it's hard to see. The problem is that the when it's the rock out there, the preservation is not very good because it's very old, and it's mostly preserved at the entrance of the cave, unlike in Europe when it's deep inside the cave. Um, I think I'm not sure if it's because people just painted it at the entrance. I don't think so, but essentially the surface of the cave wall is peeling away.
Hmm.
We're not so sure what happened. We think there's salts forming behind the surface. So anyway, the rock art is disappearing. Like with time, and the more deep you go inside the cave, you can see that the wall, like the old surface of the cave walls are gone. It's the newer surface, the fresher surface. And I remember one time I was walking in a cave really deep. You can see, okay, this is all the new fresh surface. And then you can see a little bit of the old surface, and you can see bits of fingers there. So you mean, oh, okay, so this whole thing was painted. But what we see
Mm.
today, it's 1% or less than 1%. So yeah, so it's difficult to see because of the essentially it's flaking off, but also the ones that we can date, they're the ones that have the calcium carbonate formation on top of them. So it's make them even harder to see.
Hmm.
So this big there, like, is covered with those cave popcorn.
Hmm. How do
But
you
when,
how do
when
you
you look in details, you can see them.
Yeah. And when you discover these initially, how do you find them? Are you just looking with the naked eye and you guys are just really good at picking this stuff up, or do you have to use some kind of scanner or something to sort of to actually see that something is there?
No, well, I didn't discover that site, but there's a whole team, right? So it's not me. So there's a whole team, and there's a whole team of local people also, from the local office of the preservation office, and there's an archaeology office also local there. And every year, they go and survey and stuff, and they find like dozens of those sites every year,
Hmm.
dozens.
Hmm.
And then when they have some good ones and stuff, now I've trained some people how to recognize some with samples on it for dating and stuff, and then I go back after, then I say, oh, okay, yes, that's a good one for to take a sample, and then we
Hmm.
take a sample and we date it. So our team, we have discovered also new sites, but we also work a lot with the local groups
Hmm.
there.
And so and
Uh,
so this image here, from the recent Nature paper. So it's a pig with three humans. It's at
yeah.
least 51,000 years old. Can you tell what the scene is supposed to be showing here? Like, are these human hunters that are hunting the pig? What's the story being told here? Do we know?
We don't know really. Like the preservation is pretty bad, so we don't really know. They seem to have objects in their hands.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
and one is making contact
Yep.
with the pig.
A
So we
good
think
guess
really
is it could be a hunting scene, and those could be spears or
they
something.
they could be. So, but we don't know. But there's another one that's it's in the same paper, but we redated.
Mhm.
So there's a site called Bulu Sipong 4. So I think it's going to be above that. And that's a site which, because clearly you can see it's a scene or
Mm.
like a hunting scene, that one here. And then you have multiple uh, animals there. So there's pig and there's a Noah. So I don't know if you can see on the left-hand side, there's a human we call Atherianthrope because they're not fully human. So I can come into that
Yeah.
in a minute. But that one looks like to have a spear or a rope in its hand,
Yeah.
and it's got a tail. So
Huh.
so there's a tail, and then you have lots of pigs and then a Noah. And completely on the right-hand side, you have an anoa. Well, there's two. There's a head and there's a full anoa. Next to it on the left, there's a series of small figures. They all have some rope or spear, and they have like animal attributes. So once they got like birds
Hmm.
head
Hmm. Hmm.
or something like that, which is quite interesting because we published that site for the first time a couple of years ago, also in Nature, and that was also picked up by Science as the top 10 scientific discovery of the year. And we dated that scene at the time at least 44,000. We redated it with the new laser method to 48,000
Hmm.
at least, so it's minimum 48,000. But at the time, it was the first really scene that we saw in the rock arts. The first time I saw like anything like that. So it's then at the time we said, well, it suggests that, yeah, like human at the time were not just making stencils and
Yeah.
figurative art, they were making complex
Yeah.
art, that were
Yeah.
making
They're not just tracing their
scenes.
hands or writing, simple
Exactly.
shapes. It's
So
telling a story of some kind.
it's a story. So that's the first evidence of storytelling.
Hmm.
But what's also interesting is that they're depicting not quite humans, but like what we call therianthropes. So they're half human, half animals.
Yeah.
And that's a concept in archaeology. The oldest one that's known in archaeology prior to that was the lion man, a carving from Germany dated to about
Yeah. Yeah.
40,000. So
And this is pretty
so
common, right? These therianthropes, these human animal hybrids in cave art.
yeah, but the thing is, in Europe, it doesn't. I may be wrong, and there could be some like small examples that are older, but usually it starts appearing at about 20,000
Hmm.
years ago. So in Southeast Asia, like in Sulawesi, it's much older. And it's interesting because so before when we dated instant okay, so they're making paintings, that old, and then after that you got large animal. Okay, so they're making figurative art, and then they're making a scene. But now they're depicting something that doesn't exist, right?
Right. Right.
So then it gives us essentially a view into their mind. So at the time they were capable of conceiving of things that don't exist. So that's the
Hmm.
birth of a spirituality, of religion,
Yeah.
etc. It starts
Yeah. They're able
it
to
starts from
imagine
that.
things that aren't there in front of their senses,
Yeah.
or
And that's
perhaps
what
come to them from their dreams or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what rock art and rock art dating like enables us to do. Like we can't go in the brains of the people in the past, but we can look at the pictures that they
Hmm. Hmm.
produce.
And so let's deconstruct this scene a little bit. So we've got hand stencils. People were tracing their hands. We've got these therianthropes, which are human animal hybrids. They look human like, but they've got some animal characteristics. Most of them are holding something. Is it a rope? Is it a spear? We can't say. You've got the pig here, which they may be hunting, but again, we can't say. You've got more of these human figures. And then you've got anoas. Those look like antelope of some kind.
Yeah, it's a type of dwarf bovid. So and that's endemic there, like to
Mm-hmm.
Sulawesi. It's found nowhere else on the planet.
Mm-hmm. And so people are doing this 50,000 years ago. um they're telling a story, right? So they're not just hand stencils, they're not just abstract shapes. There's some kind of narration happening here. And what's the significance of that in terms of how old this narrative capability is and what it might tell us about some of the other cognitive capabilities that people had at this time in this place?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's telling us essentially that humans have been telling stories for a very long time,
Mm-hmm.
and like we, as I said before, we like to define ourselves as a species that like to tell stories. Like, how are we different to other species? Well, yeah, that's probably it. Like we tell stories, and that's the oldest evidence of that. But it probably goes back much further than that in time. But the oldest evidence of us as a storytelling species is those cave paintings in Sulawesi, so dating now to at least 52,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And
So yep.
so in these caves, do you find any other artifacts like tools or other human artifacts that indicate, advanced behaviors that were happening?
Not in those caves. So because we haven't done any excavations in those caves, but they also so those two caves, so for example, like Liang Karampuang, that's the one at 51.2, and that one there, Belusi.4 at 48,000 minimum. They're not on the floor, like on the valley floor. They're up on the cliff face.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, there's caves everywhere there, but but this is above, so you need to climb up to go up there. So that one you need actually they made like local people like a really tall ladder with bamboo and stuff, and you need to climb up. You have to climb up a hole to get in that cave, and it's a pretty small cave. There's no soil in there anyway. That's the same thing with Karampuang. You need to climb up with like climbing gear to get in there. So there's not really caves to do excavations, but my colleague Adam Brum is excavating another site there that it's got some stuff published from there, and they found, so it's in the same region. There's old end stencil also like at the entrance, and he's doing an excavation at the entrance, and they found some like portable art also, some probably pieces of necklace and jewelry and stuff. So it's not just the rock art. People were also making other types of art, but it's very hard to find because the rock art is everywhere. But if you want to do an excavation and go that deep, then it's a lot of logistics, it's a lot of money, and not many people are doing that in that part of the world compared to what's being done and what's being done now in Western Europe. So you have lots of teams that have worked there before, so they found tons of jewelry and portable art, etc. But we just need more time and more people and people doing more excavation in those regions, and I'm sure we'll just find more.